Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I am joined by Joe Fordyce, our Flyers pre and post game live producer. And Joe, Flyers hockey is officially here. The team opens training camp Thursday. General manager Danny Briere talked to the media on Tuesday. All things Flyers pre camp. Joe, big news was he very much ruled out Carter Hart and the possibility of him coming back to the Flyers. Briere said that Hart's agent reached out to the Flyers and said that Hart is looking for a fresh start, and that pretty much was the end of it. What did you think of that news and kind of getting that out of the way, I guess?
Well, I guess the human nature side of me was surprised for him to be that honest. But then when I started thinking about it, this regime, and particularly Danny himself, unlike a lot of other general managers and sort of hierarchies in pro sports, they just tell you things. And when he said, "I'm only going to make one comment about it," I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be like the proper thing. And it was like, uh, okay, he's out of the mix. Basically, the agent said this, and we said okay, so that puts an end to it, really. And um, it's refreshing to hear something that blunt, so that no, we aren't sitting around here for a month, 6 weeks, speculating: is Carter going to come back? Um, when will he be back? All this sort of stuff. And it comes on the heels of the Ivan Fedotov trade the other day. And I think what happened was, and I know I got texts from friends and things like that were saying, Fedotov's moved, the cap space open. It's got to be for Carter Hart, right? So we got the answer today.
I thought it was really smart of Briere to do that, and the Flyers, I'm sure, deciding to just get out there and address it because Joe, as you mentioned, he can sign with the team on October 15th. It is today, Tuesday, September 16th. That's about a month of, if you don't address it, people just speculating. And you run the danger of that, the danger of fans not really knowing and just wondering. You might as well just mention that his agent called. He said Hart wants a fresh start. They felt like that's best and just end it there. So I thought it was smart for Briere, to be honest. And they've been very transparent in this rebuild. And I thought that continued Tuesday, which was I thought was good.
Yeah, and there is the whole aspect of, if you look at it, if Carter comes back, he were to come back here, it would be again for a second time where he comes back as kind of the savior of the goaltending situation that constantly seems to plague this team. And we've gone through that already. I don't think that Carter's camp is the only one in need of a fresh start. And it's good to know that, to kind of put this behind the franchise as well and say, we're going to go in another direction, whether it be Sam Ersson and Dan Vladar, whether it be somebody, one of the younger goaltenders that they have, whatever it may be, we know it's not going to be that. So you can stop speculating now. And I think that was the best way to handle it. And I have to imagine it was, I don't know, cathartic seems like a more serious word, but kind of cathartic for Danny to get that out there,
Mm-hmm.
so that you don't have to hear the whispers and talk about it anymore. And because I know ever since um, really ever since that he was found innocent, you've seen the blogs and all those sort of things that always are putting the Flyers in the mix of teams that Carter Hart could go to. And I saw something yesterday about him wanting to join a U.S. team that's a contender, and every day it's something different. Neither side needs that, nor not Carter's side, not the Flyers, and I think it's best to move on. Plus, there's something to be said for the way it ended here for Carter. Um, the leave of absence, what went on leading up to it. and kind of this is one of those things where he was found innocent, but there's still a lingering thoughts about that. And they're not all good. It's not like they're going to be unanimously good if he were to come back here. And I feel like a fresh start is a way. And then the Flyers don't have to deal with that. They don't have to deal with backlash. They can move on, and they have their guys for this year. Danny was surprisingly positive about Kolosov as well. And then, of course, we've mentioned the Bjarnason and Javargin. They have younger goaltenders in the system as well. So I think it's good for them to just move on from, and really a situation that just ended quite unpleasantly, and just kind of go forward.
There was definitely no consensus within the fan base about whether it wanted Hart back or not. I think some people felt one way, some people felt another way. Hart was found not guilty, along with the 4 other players involved in the Hockey Canada sexual assault trial in July. And then recently, the league announced its plans to reinstate those players. They can sign on October 15th, and then they'll be eligible to play on December 1. No matter how you felt about it, whether you thought the Flyers should bring Hart back or not, I think the getting out there and addressing it now was good for the Flyers. They start camp on Thursday. They have a new head coach, very much trying to push a rebuild forward. Why let it linger and just not keep your fans in the know? I think it was smart to say what happened. I think it's uncertain if the Flyers had real interest or not, but the agent did call and say, "Hey, we just want to
I
let
did
you know."
find it interesting that he said the agent called them.
Mhm.
That leads me to believe maybe there wasn't the interest that kind of a lot of people seem to assume was there. And while he was found not guilty, as he mentioned, that doesn't mean that there aren't lingering bad feelings or kind of, you know, something happened and he was involved in it.
Yo,
And
that's
that's why the league, that's why he's not immediately allowed back.
right.
So it's not just as clear cut as that. We've seen this in other things around the league. And, I'm quite sure in the midst of, rebuilding a team and trying to make their team better, the Flyers don't want to probably deal with the PR aspect of this. So that is another thing to keep in mind. I mean, people are going to have feelings about this. It wasn't a pleasant story, and people that's going to cause some feelings. And I think it's good that the Flyers can just move on from it and not really not really have to address it anymore, quite frankly.
Tuesday really was the day that it effectively was time to move on for the Flyers. I don't think there will be any more speculation or wondering what will happen with Carter Hart and the Flyers. They cut ties in June 2024, and I think they are officially parting ways, if you want to call it that, right now. Hart will probably be signing with another team in October, and we'll see where everything else goes for the Flyers in net. That's certainly a big storyline, is how the Flyers will fare in net this season. Joe, we're going to look at some storylines with camp right around the corner. Joe, where do you think the jobs are up for grabs on this Flyers roster when you project out and you look when eventually they're going to have to get down to decision time? Where do you think some jobs can be won?
I think the stacking in the lineup is definitely a place where where Trevor Zegras plays affects other people. So there's that. There's the bottom 6. I mean, I think there's some pieces that are definite where they'll play. I don't think I think is anything but definite. And then when you look at, to me, and we've talked about this, the defense core outside of your top pair, and that Drysdale will be in somewhere, but really outside of the Sanheim, York, Drysdale, the rest of it and where the guys will play, I mean, Nick Seeler is going to have a job with this team. The rest of it, to me, is all up in the air. And I think that's where the focus is going to be, because obviously we've talked ad nauseum about goaltending. And the logical next place for the conversation to go is the guys playing in front of the goaltending. And if half of your lineup, essentially, if you consider 6 defensemen, we just talked about the 3, if half of your lineup is sort of up in the air, that's a lot of big time decisions that have to be made in basically 3 weeks' time. And so I think that the defense is going to be a huge storyline during this camp.
I do too. It'll be interesting to see how the pairs shake out. Ristolainen, of course, is injured and will not be ready for the start of the season. Danny Briere did say on Tuesday that Ristolainen is trending in the right direction. They knew he was not going to be available at the start of the season, but they think within the first month and a half, maybe 2 months of the year, he'll be back. But that's a job right there up for grabs. I really think, Joe, on the wing is where we could see some action, because naturally there's just that's the position with the most openings. The most wingers are in the lineup, more than centers and defensemen. And I think you have a couple guys, a couple kids, and Alex Bump and Nikita Gerbenkin, who are, I think, knocking at the door. And so that's where I really think the competition will be fueled is, can Bump crack the lineup? Can Gerbenkin continue what he did in the rookie games where he had 2 assists and a goal? He's the kid that came back in the Scott Lawton trade. A lot of talent there on the wing. So to me, I'm really keeping an eye on Bump and Gerbenkin to see if they can make the opening night lineup.
Yeah, Bump, I mean, I would go so far to say is I'm counting on Bump making the opening lineup. We did our lineup, podcasts over the summer, and both of us had Bump in the lineup. So we're kind of counting on that. And, I'm interested to hear Wednesday this week is media day, and I'm interested to hear Bump's perspective on where he views his game, where he views fitting in. He played big time college hockey. It's not like he came from nowhere. And quite frankly, during the last part of last NHL season, we heard Alex Bump's name more than we heard some of the names of the guys that are on the current Flyers team. So I think there's a level of expectation there, but not too high. It's a manageable level of expectation. And the Flyers, I think, are high on this guy. And so I think seeing where he ends up is a huge deal, because he could very well be one of the key pieces in, I don't want to say the rebuild, but in the next era of Flyers hockey. So I'm real interested to see with Bump. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be skeptical of the leap from the college game to the NHL game and how well that translates. But what I will do, and I agree generally, but he played at a big time college program, not a program that had eyes on it, that played some of the best teams. They won a national championship. He's experienced winning. It's not just a guy coming from college, in my opinion. So I'm really interested to see what he can bring at the next level. And I don't think he's going to go out there and be a 30-goal scorer this year. But I would say I'm a little more positive about how quickly he picks up the NHL game. And there's room to do it on this team, which I think is also a key factor.
I think the most intriguing thing with him too is I think he'll fit in with NHL players. Sometimes you see a young guy, when they get the chance, they might not be this big time play driver where they're really orchestrating everything on that line, but they're really good around talent. Like Bump in the rookie games, he stood out. He looked like, one of the better players on the ice, but he didn't score. He really had to be the guy on his line. I think he'll be even better when he's around a couple of NHL players with talent, where he can kind of complement them a little bit. That's where I think he'll be most noticeable, and I think he should get a good look. He was the first name mentioned today by Briere when the GM was asked about spots being open, kids who will be pushing. It was Alex Bump. And I think the Flyers feel internally, and they're probably telling the new coaching staff, this is a kid we want to showcase, and we want to see if he's ready now, because I'm sure there's a lot of belief in the front office that he is.
Yeah, and Jordan, I'm actually curious. There was something that stuck out to me that Danny Briere said when asked about a certain player. And you actually might have been the one that asked this question. I was kind of surprised at how down the middle and reserved that Danny Briere was when asked about Emil Andre. He seemed really, really reserved about it, as opposed to kind of the way we've talked about Emil Andre on this podcast. And maybe that's to lessen the hype or / expectations. But I was kind of surprised by that, because I, for one, had him in the lineup opening night. I don't know. What did you take away from how he talked about Emil Andre?
Yeah, I think he did mention that he really showed glimpses at times, which was promising. But I think they know there's still some more work to be done there, and perhaps a lot of it's about fueling competition. Like Briere even said, no one should feel comfortable or safe with what they've done in the past, and that can be pertaining to Andre. Hey, you had a great year last year. You really opened our eyes in portions of last season, but we have other guys too that are pushing. So I really think that was probably all about no job is certain. Everyone needs to compete and push. And I do think they have more bodies on defense. They went out and signed a couple veteran guys that are going to make things interesting. And of course, they've got younger, smaller puck movers like Andre with York and Drysdale. So I really thought they're still really high on him, Joe. Perhaps it was more about fueling competition and make sure Andre's staying motivated. And I think he will be. He's a pretty determined, driven kid.
Yeah, and what you said there is the word I think that got me, the glimpses, because what I saw from Andre last year, I would say it went beyond glimpses. But in they're saying glimpses, and like you said, it could be, what words mean is all a bunch of semantics, but the way he said it, like you said, is probably fueling competition. I just I don't know. It stuck out to me that he wasn't like over the moon about Andre.
Yeah.
After last season. So I don't know. That was definitely one thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because it definitely stuck out to me about what he had to say today.
Sure. And I do feel like they're still high on him. I definitely think the read I've gotten from the Flyers on Andre is like he is so confident in making plays and doing things that maybe won't work all the time up here. I think they've needed to find a little more of a balance of knowing when to really have that moxie and make that pass or play, and knowing when to play it safe. And I think that's probably the biggest thing they want him to work on, is finding that middle ground.
Yeah, and some of what I noticed from him last year was the willingness to make a play and take a hit at times might have went a little too far.
Yeah.
In the sense that you appreciate the willingness as a smaller guy to go behind the net and make that play with your back to the forwards. But if you're going to go back there and make that play and get destroyed behind the net as a slight guy, you could also turn into, I mean, I know he was a forward, but I think of a guy like Wade Allison, was always willing to take a hit. And what happened was he started to become really injury prone. And the Flyers don't want that. This is a team that lacks size, so that might be another reason to be a little more down the middle with Andre, considering we already talked about it, York, Drysdale. These are not guys that are, tipping the scales by any stretch. So that could be another reason. But the willingness and sort of the aggressiveness at times, I think that is a thing that maybe doesn't translate from the minors to the NHL as quickly as some other things, because in the minors, you can get away with a lot of stuff that you can't get away with in the NHL. And taking gigantic hits behind the net, one, you're not always going to make that play. And sometimes you're going to take a huge hit and not make the play, which might end up in the back of your net. And two, the injury aspect of it. Because, if you're in, the other team knows that your guy's undersized, and if he's going to go in there and have his back to the play and make a play along the boards in his own zone, they're going to know to send forwards in there to hit. I mean, we see it all the time with like Garnet Hathaway on this team. You always have defensemen looking over their shoulder because they know that's what he does. He's going to force the play. So you can't expect that other teams are not going to recognize that too in Andre's game. So maybe that part has to be fine-tuned a little bit.
Yeah. And Joe, I think we all know the position that will be under the microscope come the start of the season is goaltending. I'm really curious as to what your level of confidence is in the new goaltending picture. Ivan Fedotov was traded on Sunday to the Blue Jackets. That really pretty much solidifies, I think, the tandem down in Lehigh Valley, which will be Alexei Kolosov and Carson Bjarnason. And then Samuel Ersson and Dan Vladar, the free agent signing, will make up the tandem in the NHL. As we all know, Vladar's career high in games is 30. He's been a backup, and the Flyers really want him to play more. They want him to push Ersson, but both Keith Jones and Briere expressed a lot of belief in Samuel Ersson. They believe he's still in a great age for development, and that they believe Vladar will give him a little more protection, a little more comfort to know that like he's not just the guy that has to go out there and kind of carry the Flyers. How do you feel about the goaltending picture? Do you feel that it will be better and give the Flyers a better chance to maybe push for the playoffs?
Better, yes, but better is not really saying that much when you consider what last year turned into as far as goaltending. But it's interesting. I was talking to somebody in the know, and he said that there are scouts and team people that really believe that Dan Vladar has another level. Now, I wonder if that's what the Flyers believe, and they're looking that maybe they can unlock. We heard a lot from Rick Tocchet about unlocking guys that are on the team. And I can't remember if the Flyers signed Dan Vladar before or after they hired Rick Tocchet. So I'm not certain he was referring to Vladar per se, but maybe this is a guy that they can unlock a little bit. And today's NHL, there's very few teams that have goaltenders that play 65 games, 70 games. It's just really not that kind of NHL anymore. So maybe they do have a tandem. And we've seen Ersson flourish when he doesn't have, as Danny Briere put it this morning, the pressure of playing 3 and 4 games a week. So maybe he plays 2 games a week and Vladar plays 1 game a week. Or maybe you just leave it up to Talk to ride the hot hand. Whoever's going better, play that guy more. But again, I'm interested to hear what Sam Ersson has to say at Media Day to us, because I remember him last year when he was kind of anointed the starting goalie, and he was the one that said, wait a second, I have more to do. I have more to prove. I have more to show. I'm interested to hear what he has to say this week about that, because I think the Flyers made an investment in Dan Vladar to really put Ersson in the best position to show his best game, much like he did when he was in tandem with Carter Hart.
Joe, I found it very interesting when Briere also said today that he feels the system under Rick Tocchet could protect Ersson as well. And I found that interesting because John Tortorella's teams really defended, but maybe perhaps they took risks too often. Tortorella was very much about taking calculated risks, and he often would say when you would take that risk, sometimes it would lead to a really good chance the other way. And he said, like, I remember him saying one time, that's why you have a goalie. A goalie needs to be there to make a save after you take a risk that might not work. So I'm curious just to see how Tocchet coaches his system and how it might help the goalie a little bit more than what the Flyers felt like they were getting under Tortorella.
Yeah, I found that interesting too, because when you think of Torts, you think of structure defensively and blocking shots and doing things to keep the puck off the goaltender.
Yeah.
But like you said, the risks, and right away I think of Drysdale's, his propensity to pinch and we saw it a couple times result in going the other way and somebody taking a penalty, putting the Flyers on the kill, or just a flat out breakaway on the goalie. So I am interested to see exactly what Danny was referring to, see that play out on the ice, and I think we'll get an early look at where the confidence level of both of these goaltenders is. Yeah. And I think a lot, like, the words all sound good. The does Vladar have another level? Ersson playing less games might bring out the best in him, and these sort of things. Where that really comes, the true feeling about that really comes, is when you see this on the ice in a game that matters. And I think we'll quickly get a feel for what this goaltending situation is, within the first 2 weeks of the season, I think.
And Joe, I think there's some pressure on the Flyers now to really take a step. No, they don't have to be a playoff team, and I don't think the Flyers internally are going to judge this team whether it makes the playoffs or not. But Keith Jones said it recently that, like, they're not in selling mode anymore. They don't have visions of going into the trade deadline needing to sell. Like, they want to be in a position where they're starting to bring people in and grow. But how do you feel about the state of the rebuild right now? Like, is it realistic to say we want to get better, we want to take steps, but playoffs don't have to be the end-all goal? It's a tough, I think, line to really tiptoe a little bit when you want to get better, but it's not like, hey, we got to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I found Briere's comments interesting about we don't want to make the playoffs 1 year, and then I believe he said, and then disappear for 3. Mm-hmm. And then, they're looking to be a perennial contender. And building within, I think, is the way you do that. And he did go on to talk about how there's kind of this perception that after this season, when all this money clears up, and I'm referring to the Kevin Hayes contract and a few other things, but that there's this perception that the Flyers are going to go out and add all these pieces from the outside. Danny was really, really kind of bullish on that today, saying that some of that cap space could go to re-signing guys like Mishkov, and he mentioned a few other guys, and I don't think that's really what people are thinking about. But if these guys take next steps, they're going to have to get paid as well. So there is that aspect to it, and there isn't this sort of and I'm thinking back to the days when Ed Snyder was really kind of, Bob Clark was the GM, but Ed Snyder was really kind of pulling the strings. And what they would do is they would go out and get big names. They'd bring in big names to the benefit sometimes, to the detriment sometimes of the team. And you can't build a perennial contender by signing free agents. Free agents have to go along with the pieces that you bring through your own organization. And I think that's what Danny's talking about. It's not, hey, let's wait until after this year where we go on this huge spending spree and reshape the entire team as if they're, a college football team dipping into the transfer portal. That's what it's not. It's interesting to hear Briere now talking about that, because I felt like in John Tortorella's last interview he did with Ashlyn Sullivan last year, he talked very much like they were going to go out and do that. There was a lot of talk about the money's freed up. We're going to go get this. We're going to do that. We're not paying guys that aren't on the team anymore. It's time to start adding a bunch of pieces, which I think to the fan is free agents and big name free agents, because of the money that's available. And so I would stress that may not be the case. I'm not saying they don't add anyone, but if you expect them to go out and sign 6 free agents of, a big numbers, I don't think that's what we're looking down at the end of, next offseason.
I think it's heavily reliant on how they do this season. I think the big thing is the Flyers can't regress this season. They already hit rock bottom last year. They have publicly stated that they want to get better. So they really can't take a step back. I don't think that would be very good at all, especially when you're trying to sell this to your fan base of we're ready to get better. And really, why this season could be so telling is how close to being a contender will they become at the end of the season, but also how attractive will they be to free agents too? Like, will their on ice product be better? And will they be in a better position to take a next step to where if they do want to, tap into free agency, well, what kind of players will want to come here, understanding where the team is? So it's a really important year for them to take steps, not only for the people in the organization, but also maybe to attract some guys to eventually want to come here because they will have some more money to spend. And I think that's an avenue they could look to take if they're in position.
Yeah, and that's what the Flyers were in the era that I just referred to when Bob Clark was the GM and Ed Snyder, and they would go out and get these big names. The Flyers were a destination. They were the place where Adam Oates wanted to come late in his career, where Jeremy Roenick came after Eric Lindros departed, where Mark Recchi came back to, where Rick Tocchet came back to. They were the place. They were a destination where Chris Pronger came to late in his career to try to win a Stanley Cup. They wanted to make this that kind of place again. And you have to do that first by taking care of your own and bringing your own through the system. And I think that's what Danny Briere was talking about today when he was talking about all that.
Yeah. Well, a lot to follow, a lot to watch coming up here. Flyers training camp opens on Thursday. The preseason opens on Sunday. We'll have it all covered here on the Flyers Talk podcast. Joe Fordyce, our Flyers pre- and post-game live producer, thank you so much. A big thank you to Tom Feiner for helping us out here, record and get this everywhere. And a big thank you, of course, as always, Flyers fans, for listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, please rate and listen, and we can't wait to talk to you next time.